Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I'm very excited today. We've got Henry Johnstone. We only met recently, but we vibed immediately. I feel like we connected on so many levels, right? Around addiction. I want to say masculinity, even though I'm not a man, but we talked about that topic because I work a lot in sort of male-dominated industries. And mostly Henry is a coach who is changing the world one powerful conversation at a time. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Hello, Petra. It is a pleasure.
It's so exciting to have you. So give our listeners just a little bit of context. What are you passionate about at the moment? What is it that you do?
What am I passionate about? Being of service, giving value. It's a thing that's said a lot in the self-development industry, but honest to God, it's the only thing that makes me feel like my life is of purpose, you know? And I live in London at the moment with my beautiful partner, my two beautiful dogs. I'm coaching men and women. I'm creating powerful conversations and helping people challenge what they think they're capable of. Like, everyone is more powerful than they could ever possibly imagine. And that's where I come in to help them see that.
Isn't it fascinating it sounds simple, right? How to have a powerful conversation. Like, how would you, what does that mean? So people who aren't in the self-development industry, what does a powerful conversation mean?
Powerful conversation hinges, maybe, or maybe not, I don't care.
That's fine.
A powerful conversation hinges around one central theme, is that you become real. Because by and large, as we live life, we are not real with people. So no one sees the real us. So if we don't show that our real selves, how can we do what we were born to do? That's what a powerful conversation is. It brings you in, you get real, you get vulnerable. I encourage all my clients to get vulnerable. And if they don't, I can pick out places where they're being it, but they don't know they are. And this aha moment, they're like, oh shit, that's how I feel. It's like, that's how you feel. What are you going to do about that? You know,
so kind of holding a mirror up to them a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Like we are our most powerful tool. But we need to be able to see ourselves and speak with the voice which we haven't been allowing ourselves to speak. And only then can we create goals and actions around that.
And probably about 10 years ago, I would have found this conversation and what you said, no offense to you, because I totally get it now, like totally fluffy, a little bit wanky, a little bit like, oh, those people, they just talk stuff. And, you know, and I had never really experienced what the hell that meant. So I want to nod to those people who might be listening.
Absolutely. Oh my God. I'm there.
You were one of them, right?
Like a fucking wank. All of that, you know?
But what the thing is, when you experience it, and I know we both have had on our own journeys, like the reality of just being real, as you said, being vulnerable, being straight up, no more masks, no more hiding behind the what ifs and will people judge me and any of that, just allows you to step into this powerful, successful, whatever that means to you, person. And the bit that I value the most of it, regardless of success or even fulfillment, is the deep personal connections I now have. So like the friendships, I feel seen, I feel like deeply connected. It's powerful, so powerful.
Until you experience it, it's very easy to brush off as kind of slightly woo.
Yeah.
Or fluffy, but when you do experience it, it is transformative. And the thing about it is that it's transformative every single time. It's never a shallow layer of connection. It's always, my God, I've allowed myself to be seen by myself. And now, by proxy, other people are seeing me. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't feel sad anymore. I don't feel pressured anymore. I don't feel jealous. It's like, what
a relief, right? And then it becomes like the new normal. And then you start surrounding yourself with people who get it and who are like that. And then sometimes I talk like this to people who don't, and I'm not when I'm working. And I get surprised that they don't understand every aspect of what I'm saying. I'm like, oh, right. It's taken me 10 years of like re-brainwashing myself. Anyway, I obviously love this topic. I love this topic and I love the journey that you've been on. So I want to go right back for a second. Give us a little bit of context to Henry as a young man, as a boy. Do you think that maybe your parents and the education system kind of set you up for life in the real world, built your resilience up and gave you what you needed?
I think they used all the tools that they had available, and they used the tools which they thought would work because they had worked with my eldest brother and my middle brother. They had no reason to think that it wouldn't work. So the answer to that is no, but by no fault of their own. You know,
Sure.
the Philip Larkin poem of like, parents don't mean to fuck you up, but they do, like very, very apt for my journey. Like, I was a beautiful little boy. You know, I was really kind. I was really, really sweet. I was so sensitive. And like, I was a little kid who would get up and pick flowers for my mum and then walk to everyone's house, say, can I walk your dog? Like, I still have this kind of pathological need to be helpful and to be loving, which was very much there when I was a child. But all that sensitivity, and I was severely dyslexic, which wasn't kind of really diagnosed properly around that time, and ADHD and this kind of brief manifesting mental illnesses. Like, I had my first episode of depersonalization when I was 11.
Really? That's young.
Yeah, like, and it's terrifying for me. Like, and I still have these episodes now, but I'm far better at dealing with them. But when they happen, and no one knows what they are, and you've just got this screaming child who says he doesn't know who he is, doesn't know who my mum is, you know, just screaming and rocking backwards and forwards. Like, what were they to think? It was completely out of their sphere of experience. So I very quickly became the boy who they loved, but they didn't know what to do with.
What did that feel like growing up?
What did it feel like? It felt like I was a problem.
Mm.
You know, it felt like I couldn't make them proud like I really wanted them to feel proud about me. I felt quite lost, felt quite sad, felt like it didn't fit in. You know, all I wanted to do was just make mum and dad happy. All I wanted to do was have a nice circle of people that I fit in with, but I always felt like the sore thumb. I always felt forever kind of changed by that experience and the way that they were with me. So I had this kind of level of self-awareness which didn't allow me to be childish and innocent, because I'd seen something which was monstrous on the other side.
And it's like you didn't have the language at that stage to express what was actually going on for you. Do you remember outside support already, sort of through, I don't know, school counselor or psychologist or ADHD special, I don't know, someone?
There was none of that when I was growing up. We had a educational psychologist diagnose me for dyslexia. So they knew that, you know, there was something like, I couldn't write my name until I was like 8. You know, it was quite severe. So, and also people kind of know that about a kid as well. Like, oh, there's that kid who can't write his name. And I was an odd little boy, and I hid that for a long time. But man, I'm fucking proud of that shit now, because like I am very odd, bit of a weirdo, but it's great. And I love that about myself.
Yeah, so when you get to be your true self and embrace your uniqueness and realize that that's your part of your purpose and your value in the world, it's totally liberating. Do you think there was conditioning for you as a young boy, so a male, as far as, you know, get on with it, show no weakness, don't ask for help, any of that sort of thing growing up?
Yeah, it didn't come from my parents. It came from like the wider media context that I absorbed. Like, James Bond, I grew up watching a lot of James Bond, and James Bond doesn't cry. He just plows on. If he gets injured, he just plows on. He also treats women horrifically, which I did try, but
How'd that go?
I was like, why does this feel so wrong? But that was like and there was obviously the cartoons like He-Man and Action Man. Everything I had was very Action Man based. And I'm not saying like those are inherently bad.
No.
Because a lot of people see them and they don't like feel imprisoned, but I took it on board differently. You know, I developed like very early on that there was this ideal state of being a man growing up, that he should take on everything and be able to hold it. He should be like a warrior unto himself, and he should never ask for help. And I'll get onto that. Like, I'll tell you how that kind of warped into something incredibly unhealthy for me and how it manifested later on in life.
But there were definitely some seeds of that kind of thinking just through society, expectations, James Bond, you know, role models, and the way the expectations are. I mean, still, like going to a toy shop. I have a boy and a girl, so I have 2 kids, and just interesting to see society's effect even now. and the part that we can play as parents to kind of change the narrative somewhat. But it's still tricky. There's so many expectations for men. So when we talk about this theme of adversity, so challenges, and I'm just curious about, how they showed up in your life, and, do you identify with terms that kind of might lead to rock bottom moments or anything like that? What comes up for you?
I do identify with terms like rock bottom. I
Yeah,
think rock bottom's definitely a thing, and a rock bottom is merely the place that you are before it gets better, because that's the ultimate place where you end up. And people can say you have lots of rock bottoms. That's absolutely
sure.
fine.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so yeah, I totally identify with that. And sometimes you think it's the rock bottom, and then you're like, oh shit, there's another level to this, right? I probably can identify two very clear ones that started me on the path to recovery, and out of a desperation, like being close to death or putting my kids in danger, things like that, that just made me go, huh, do I want to keep doing this? Like, where's that kind of enlightened moment. And so I know that we connect on just the theme of addiction, and that showed up in both of our lives in some way. Do you think that when challenges started showing up for you, so obviously from a young age they started showing up, do you think that challenges that showed up, I don't know, when you were continuing school or moving into young adulthood, that you were able to cope with them in a kind of resilient manner, or did they kind of knock you for six?
They're not me for six.
Did they?
The biggest moment of adversity came to me when I was a kid and I went to boarding school, because my mum and dad were so terrified that I wouldn't be able to pass the common entrance.
Yeah.
Because, when it's 13, you do the common entrance, you move on. So they moved me to boarding school, which was where I grew up in Yorkshire. And that acted like the catalyst for all the manifesting problems that were just starting within me. So I went to boarding school. I was very isolated. I soon started to go off the rails. If I didn't really have a lot of confidence in myself, and I'd known, being a sensitive child, that in order to survive, I needed to hide myself, because the world couldn't give me the emotional things that I needed. My emotional needs weren't met in the outside world. So it's like, keep it under hidden. But I still felt everything.
Of course.
And boarding school was an incredibly masculine, cold, sterile environment. This was a place where the pinnacle of achievement was to run a 10-mile run through ice cold hills at the end of your time there. And I was like, yay, that sounds great.
Oh my God. Do you remember any affection or talking about emotions or like pastoral support, as they might refer to it now?
No.
Really?
Not. Like,
so you've got this. Go ahead.
My mum and dad were quite good with that, but it was when these needs weren't met in schools that they didn't really know how to deal with that. But there was no pastoral care in that school. It was hideous in almost every single way it could be.
So how do you think that has impacted you in your adult life?
I think it impacted me up to a point of hiding myself, of learning how to survive.
Wear the mask.
While adapting. It's like I will hide myself so I don't have to show myself, because for a good few years after I left boarding school, I was still in boarding school. I perceived adult men around me as being people in boarding school, and I would react in the same way. It'd be like, I'm not going to show them this. I'm definitely not going to show them that I'm a bit odd. I'm a bit weird and my humor's a bit strange, because they will bully me. I will be singled out and since I was at school when I was 7, adults would bully me as well. They would single me out as being an odd child, and they would bully me and make me feel like I was a retard. That's
worthless.
Worthless, very strange. What an odd, horrible little boy that is, And this was just a kid who just wanted to love. That's all I wanted to do. But I just didn't get that. And then I didn't get it in boarding school. And I was not sport-minded, but yet they funneled me into. There was this one experience, which was before boarding school.
Yeah.
It just up, and I was 7 years old. I was in goal, and this guy, he did not like me. He hated me for whatever reason. And he just got the whole team just to kick footballs at my head for like an hour, and I was in tears and I was crying, but he just kept. It was really, really kind of really violent and really aggressive in a lot of ways. And those kind of experiences just tended to happen to me. So I kind of expected it from. I saw men who were in positions of control as enemies, and therefore I hid myself.
So you've just got to be sort of hypervigilant, as a therapist might put it, or on guard at all times and not show any of your real stuff, which is what you were talking about at the beginning, which you do so well now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so at what stage did you start, did you start turning to substances of any kind to escape, or talk us through that bit?
So it was always substances and self-harm.
Okay.
The self-harm started in when I was around 8, where I would get blisters, like ulcers on my tongue, and then I'd take them off with nail clippers. That's quite an intense experience for an 8-year-old boy to do, but that's what I thought. That's what I thought a man would do. That's the kind of the warped sense of taking on pain and be able to handle pain. I used to call it battle damage. I'd be like, I'm battle damaged, so I can carry on. And then in boarding school, I think after I internalized all these feelings, they had to come out somewhere. And booze, oh my God, booze was amazing. It just helped calm it all. It made sense. I felt relaxed. I didn't feel in fear. I felt limitless. I felt bold, and it was a bit naughty. So it's like, hang on. So all this, I feel great. This can be my identity. I can be that guy. I feel good with that. That feels naughty, rebellious. This feels like the voice that I need to have that I haven't had. So I just threw myself into that. But, and I stole from, I was just a little criminal. I'd break into houses, I'd steal their booze.
Specifically for the booze.
Yeah. And for just the kind of excitement of it all, I really needed to clasp onto an identity which would also help me express all the angst that I was feeling and all the shit that I was holding inside. And also on another level, it was like, I'm not sensitive because look at this.
Yeah.
I'm a thief. And I still tear my tongue apart with toe clippers. It's like, I'm not sensitive. I don't feel emotion. I'm a criminal. That's where I went to. That was my high. And it was when after I had my first drink of alcohol, I was like, right, how do I make this a constant in my life? And I made a very conscious decision that I would do whatever it took to get that feeling at that age. And so I did that.
So just, it's such a striking image, the toenail clippers and, the pain element and the total overcompensation, right? If I can't survive in the world and I get bullied and I have pain reinforced, if I'm my sensitive self, then obviously I need to go to the other extreme in order to belong and to fit in or create some kind of identity. And I totally identify with the first time that you drink, right? Or the first time that you drink properly, and there's this illusion that you are now, this is who I'm meant to be.
Yes.
Like I am now myself.
Yes.
I'm like, this is the person who's been waiting to break out, who's chilled, bit funny, life of the party, knows how to flirt. We'll get up and dance. We'll just be involved, be seen. I think that's the thing that I tried to do my whole life was I played invisible. So I was raised in a religious cult, right? And so my brother would get punished mercilessly in front of me. And my survival mechanism was to just shut up and just go below the radar and to mask the endless anxiety with, deep down and this feeling of not fitting in or not being good enough. Not that I could put any of those words on the situation, right? It was just survive, 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 right? And drinking just gave me a sense of weird meaning. I know that sounds weird, but it was just this must be how other people feel all the time. That was my assumption.
Yeah,
little bastards, right?
Absolutely. It's like, I have my golden elixir, which is going to allow me to fit in, and everything will make sense now.
Absolutely. And so you chase the illusion of the fitting in or the finding the identity, and it feels magical for a little while. It feels possible. And then, of course, as we both know, over time, the cracks begin to show. or it begins doing less, the feeling shorter. We chase it and it doesn't quite magically give us that hit, so we've got to pursue more. We get into dangerous situations. I mean, how long were you in active addiction? How did it progress? What was the impact, I guess, on your relationships and your life? Loaded question, that one.
It's a great word. As you were talking now, I was like, oh my God, that's so right. You know, I haven't spoken to a fellow addict in Britain for a while, and it's just all you were hitting all the greats, Petra. Like, is that the greatest hits? Like,
Yeah.
man, yeah. So I burnt out pretty quickly. I was
That's
10 years
okay.
in active addiction, so I started full on, and it impacted. It was very, very similar to your your story. I thought, this is what I need. I fit in finally. That void of angst and fear is just gone. What can I do?
Yeah.
I can do all of this. Like, so yeah, it was all right for a bit. I got expelled from boarding school because of booze. That was a problem for me. I was like, I suppose it's not sectioning because I was 14, but I got taken into an inpatient psychiatric ward because of my behavior. I made up like a lot of stuff that was going on. There was some stuff that was going on. I was like, this, that, and they're like, this boy is not okay. So I was an inpatient for a long time.
But what you're saying, some of it was real and some of it you embellished in order to get out of boarding school?
Just to get the fuck out of boarding school.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah.
I just, and I'm like, there were a lot of things going wrong inside my head, but some of them were a little bit more embellished.
Sure. But you were doing the self-harm, and if you had the depersonalization or the criminal behavior, there's a little bit of a list there of,
there was enough.
You need help. Yeah.
There was enough there. Yeah. So I went there, and then I went to sort of secondary school, and that's when I found, cannabis, and then alcohol was part of that. And I would just drink, I'd do whatever and it was kind of okay for a bit. It was kind of all right. And then I got really into smoking weed, and it was the same thing, Petra. It was like, this makes me feel amazing. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And booze was just always there as a part of it. And obviously I needed money, so I got a job. I would get fired from jobs endlessly because I was just a liability. And I can laugh about it now, but fuck me. Never have been put in a kitchen to do a job. That's
knives. Yeah, maybe not.
Knives with everything. I was like, it's just a nightmare. And then the drinking, really took off. And my parents were at a loss of what to do with me because I was stealing thousands of pounds from them, like taking checks, frauding them. This precipitated a whole sort of my first rock bottom, and kind of things got all right for a bit. And then when I was sort of 23, massively kicked off again. And that was like one of the darkest times of my life, where I was just drinking, taking cocaine, taking ecstasy, and smoking weed. And I just turned into a monster. That was like the first time where I punched my parents, when I attacked my parents. There's one story that I tell sometimes, and it's a painful memory for me. I was like, I'm a big guy, so I'm like 6'3".
You are, yeah.
Losing a bit of weight, whatever. Anyway, at that time, I was so emaciated. And I'd been kicked out of home, so I was living on the streets. I was homeless for a matter of time, and I was so alone that I went back to my parents' house, and there was like a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter window in the basement, and I kicked that through, and I managed to crawl through it. That's how thin I was.
Right.
I went into the basement, and I just slept on that cold floor, and just kind of in this weird way that I needed to be close to my parents, that I needed that kind of love, that I needed them to know that I was in pain and that I couldn't do this on my own, and to let all those masks just fall and just say, Mum, Dad, I'm in fucking trouble. I just want a hug. I just want to feel your skin, that kind of thing. But I couldn't tell them.
No.
I was so ashamed, and I was so filled with guilt for all the horrible shit that I had taken them through. That in my addicted, I use the word warped kind of way, that was the only thing that I could do. And that was, as I say, that was incredibly dark, and it only really got darker. And it got to the point where I'd moved to London. I had a girlfriend, she left, and that just precipitated what I call the end because my self-harm just went through the roof. You know, I was taking I'm going to trigger warnings for
Yeah,
anyone.
thank you. Yeah.
I took a soldering iron and I sat down and I cut through like the fat of my arm for about 6 hours, creating a tattoo. You know, gave myself beyond 3rd-degree burns because I thought that was what you did. I made knives so I could heat them up and stab myself. You know, I was walking across Hammersmith Bridge and I used to give myself paper cuts between my toes and fill my shoes with lemon juice and salt so that I can in some way elevate myself up to this point of incredible pain that I could feel as an equal with those people who would walk around me, because I felt so detached from that. You know,
So the pain would almost connect you in a weird way to reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt so ashamed of myself that if I saw someone on the street, I was convinced that they would see the shame that I was so desperately trying to hide. And
but then they wouldn't. And then I imagine, and then it's like you want people to see you, but equally you hide. It's this weird doing both, because the disappointment that people don't see you just adds to the loneliness, right?
Absolutely. And it's this weird kind of way that I was operating, you know, and they absolutely wouldn't have seen the shame and the guilt. I was just trying to handle it.
Well, you were torturing yourself with it, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
absolutely torturing yourself with it. And then I guess recovery or any other way of life, like imagine if yourself now had talked to that guy as he was walking on the bridge and said, hey, all the wanky stuff you said at the beginning, right? And said, you are the most powerful person in the world. You don't know your power. Let's have a powerful conversation, right? In the sense that you wouldn't have known what to do with it, I imagine. You wouldn't have been able to hear. I don't know.
You look a lot like me.
This is weird.
I'm going to go this one. Bye.
What did I smoke, man?
It's funny you say that. It's like, I thought, and the reason why we describe our conversations as having powerful conversations is because we've been to a place where we've seen it at its worst.
Yeah.
And we need to communicate very quickly to someone without going through our entire backstory and the context of why we believe that. So that's why we get these, you know, powerful conversations at a time, transformation, because we know and we need to communicate that as quickly as possible to someone.
And then I'm sort of jumping ahead and I'll go back again in a minute, but do you think in order to have the powerful conversations at the level that we do, right, and have the impact that we have, do you think it's directly correlated to how shit it was for a little while there? Like, did we need that kind of darkness in order to impact, like have the reverse? I
do. I think to hold a powerful space, you need to have traveled the full spectrum. Like my sister-in-law always says, I give you so much respect, Henry. I'm like, why? Well, you've had the bus and you got the ticket to Crazy Town, but you came back. And it's like, you need someone to have a powerful conversation. You need someone who has been to their darkest point, so that when you go to your darkest point, they will not falter on you and they will be able to hold that space with you. That's where the power comes in, because people can encounter vulnerability and they won't know how to hold it. And if you're in a space where someone doesn't know how to hold your vulnerability, it's going to send you the same message that I got when I was a kid, was that my vulnerability was not okay and it must be hidden. And you'll feel
it's too much. Yeah, it's too much and it can't be handled. Exactly. And so you go, oh, fuck, I tested that out. Let me pull it right back in, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's, and I think, you know, darkness can be made, there can be meaning created from it. And that's why I rate people like you, Petra, you know, who have been to the dark place, but you're still fucking here and you're making meaning from it. You know, I don't hear you talk about self-pity. I don't hear you talk about blame. It was you, what you did, and what the fuck you're doing about it now.
I recently went through a breakup, and my friend was like, let's just do nothing for New Year's and let's just be depressed and let's just isolate. Like, that's essentially what she was saying. And I text her and I just went, not if I can help it. I'm like checking, like in touch with people. And she went, you're so resilient. How have you moved that around so quickly? And it's just life. Like I know what the pity party and the victimhood feels like. I've
Uh,
spent time there.
uh,
Time. Yeah.
we got degrees in that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I've got degrees in shame, isolation, and pity party victimhood. And I refuse, like, I choose to not go there anymore. I choose
That's
to look at fulfillment and growth, right? So I'm curious about your recovery journey, and was there a particular rock bottom that was the thing, or that was the next catalyst moment for you to go, fuck, I've got to go to rehab, or just begin, changing things? Talk us through that. But
it was very much out of my hands. Like I was, man, I don't. To all intents and purposes, people look at me. I'd left the building. You know, there's no other. I was talking to. I don't remember the conversations I was having with my mum, but when she repeats them back to me, I was like, Jesus, I just was not there. I was in a pit of filth, living, just unable to clean, puke, vomit, shit, blood, self-harm, all of that. It was horrific. And it got very much taken out of my hands. They phoned up a social worker that said he's not okay.
wow.
My sister-in-law essentially came in. She's a psychotherapist. She was like, okay, listen, he needs to be put under some kind of, I don't think it was a section. My girlfriend, who's a mental health nurse, says, Henry, always be super clear about this, because I still need to get clarification. But I got taken to an acute ward, which was a detox ward, but it was also a kind of acute mental health ward, just removed from booze.
I do find it fascinating that both of your parents are in education, I think. Your sister's a psychotherapist. Obviously, your now girlfriend's a mental health nurse, but that like people in your immediate family are seem to be really developed, really smart, really in the helping type professions, right? And so it almost doesn't compute. Like people would think, and I had really good parents and people who were there for me. It almost doesn't compute that you had this context growing up, but yet you went down this addictive, mental health kind of path. I don't know.
Well, I think I was born with those things. I don't think they were created because I had some experiences or a lack of. Like, I was born an addict, and I was born with a particular mental health makeup. And my parents, as I said before, my parents had very specific tools which they could use to help me. But I was just way out of their comfort zone, way out of any contextual experience that they've had. And yeah, you're right. It is kind of a bit funny, but I think it shows the severity of how far I got and how quickly I went there.
And I guess I say it to kind of challenge any judgment that people have around the context, because people do. They're like, oh, that happened, and therefore, and it's like, well, yes, things do affect us, but also there is something about our chemistry and our mental makeup. That, because none of my siblings are addicts. My biological father probably is, but I didn't grow up with him, so there's something genetic rather than nurture. Anyway, we could do a whole podcast on that. So you get taken. Not sectioned, but taken in some way to a rehab.
It was a mental health.
Oh, a mental health ward. Sorry. Yeah. So then what happened? Talk us through that bit.
And I stayed there for 2 months, and then I got taken to a 12-step rehab, which I owe my life to. Like, honest to God, I didn't know anything about 12 steps. I did the 12 steps while I was there. I was there for 3 months. And then it came up to the funding for the next 3 months, which was pretty rare. And I just said to him, it's like, listen, if I leave this rehab, I'm going to use. I just know that I'm going to use. I don't feel that I'm able to make the decisions yet. Please keep me in here. Please. This is my life.
Wow.
I got the extra 3 months. So I did 6 months residential in this rehab. And my God, like, I faced everything in there, and I just did not stop. And I discovered this, it's funny, where the self-harm would propel me towards physically damaging situations, that kind of flipped a little bit. So I became drawn to potentially emotionally stressful situations. That was how I tuned my warrior to work with me and for me, to be bold. And that served me. My therapist always said to me, Henry, you're like wringing water out of a cloth. You just literally won't stop until the very last bit of shame and guilt is out there. I'm like, fuck yeah, that's what I do.
That's so funny. But, well, because if you know that there's a way that you can get to the bottom of it, like I was having therapy every other week, and then I'm like, oh, there's this trauma piece that I just need to, like, I haven't faced up to yet. So I like piled on some trauma therapy on top of what I was doing, obviously
Yeah,
being transparent, but I was like, obviously it makes sense to just delve into that at the same time while building a business and doing everything else. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah, there's like, because I think we can see the other side of that hard work. And so, and I don't know, there's a little bit of fear as well of, if I don't put the work in, I know where I can get to. I know how bad it gets. Isn't there a bit of that as well?
absolutely. It's a very realist point of view. It's like, I've been to Crazy Town.
Yeah.
Like, if I don't do this, then there's the risk that I'll just pick up that ticket again and go back. And I don't want to go back there. I actually quite, like they used to say, the good news is that your feelings come back. The bad news is that your feelings will come back, like all of that. And I just like, as long as there's work to do, then I can feel like I'm making steps forward. And there is no small, like, vulnerability, okay? Like, vulnerability. It takes courage to face yourself and to be vulnerable where you don't know the outcome of a situation, especially when you're in a group. Vulnerability is just not weakness. We need to get rid of this idea that it's weakness, because it's not, it's courageous. By its very definition of being courageous, it is not a weakness. And that is what built me this courage. I built up a sense of self, being like, I am courageous. And when I'm courageous, I get success. It works. This success, which I felt I was always beyond my reach, and I was kind of a little bit afraid of, when I got vulnerable and I owned my own shit and I said how I really felt and it was okay, I hold that courage now. Like, that is the one thing that I have that has helped me move forward more consistently than anything else.
So you obviously practiced that loads in 6 months of sort of 12-step rehab. And there's something powerful about being in groups and sharing, and particularly, I imagine, a man with other men in the group to be sharing that sort of level of vulnerability.
There's so many stigmas, and like, I met everyone in boarding school within that room.
Did
You know,
you?
like
The type
project.
of person. Oh, I see. Oh, I
Yeah,
see. You like had to face up to.
yeah, and all the lads, all the kind of shit, which just used to screw me over because I could never be like them, and I kind of thought if I was, then everything I'd fit in. I met all of them, and it was agonizing and horrible, but my God, it galvanized me, you know. And
And go ahead.
I think I got really vulnerable around the real guilt and the shame. Like, so that helped me, and that was an appropriate place to do it. So I laid the foundation of the hardcore vulnerability, and then when I left rehab, I was able to play around with, like, right, how much vulnerability is maybe not appropriate in this situation. When I went to uni, and this was like, first time at uni, second time at uni, first time was a complete fucking disaster.
Sure.
The second time I went, I used to tell people that, oh yeah, I was homeless, and all this. I divulge all this information because I still wasn't quite secure in myself, maintain my own identity. And of course, I was a mature student. These guys were 18. They had no fucking idea of the context of all that. It just made me seem like empty, weird Henry words, it's like, and that made me feel isolated, so I've always been learning of, like, vulnerability. When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate?
That's a super powerful distinction, because we talk about vulnerability a lot, and there's a misconception that it's just about spilling your guts at every opportunity to every single person. Like, how do you categorize, or how do you make the decision for you personally about when it's appropriate and when it isn't? Like, what do the conditions need to be like in order for it to be safe or appropriate to be vulnerable?
I mean, it has to be safe. You've got to do it. I will only be vulnerable if it's in a safe environment. And if it's something that, say, within this podcast, I've been vulnerable because I'm quite used to talking about these things, but I don't know how you're going to react, Petra.
Sure.
I don't have any control over how your audience are going to react, but I'm like, hey, this is safe. I know enough about myself to say this and be okay with what I'm saying. It's not a risk to me, so it shouldn't be a risk to anyone else. If I'm within a relationship with my girlfriend and I have to be vulnerable, I will tell her first, I want to be vulnerable right now. I need to be heard. And she'll be like, okay.
Is that almost like code? Does she know, not code, but does she know what that means as far as what her role then is
Yeah.
within that? Because
Yeah.
sometimes people want to fix, right? Especially or they don't know, there's a fear of how they might handle someone else's vulnerability.
Yeah, that is a massive problem with a lot of men in relationships and getting vulnerable. That's a whole nother podcast. But it is kind of code like, and almost now we're so used to communicating with each other that it doesn't need to be said. But
Sure.
if I'm about to divulge something that potentially I feel quite sensitive around, then I need to let her know that that is what I'm going to do. So then she can be like, okay, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to see you and honor you for what you're doing, which is showing me part of yourself that you haven't shown anyone else.
So rather than being passive, it's taking responsibility for helping set up the conditions that allow you to be vulnerable.
And people often think this is kind of this weird way to go, but you're talking about you, the most precious part of you that potentially you haven't shared with anyone. So you need to start having these, I'm saying you.
I do, yes. Preach. Tell me. I do.
But to do it, like, I needed to make sure that the setting was safe. And I need to make sure that, like, the great example of being vulnerable is people go out drinking, you let your guard down, you tell someone something which you've been holding on for ages. Next morning, you're like, shit, what did I do? That is a perfect example of being vulnerable in an inappropriate situation.
Sure.
You need to lay the groundwork and you need to let people know that you need to be heard within this.
And then the flip side is true, that it can be promoting vulnerability in the world to really listen, to actively listen and create safe spaces, which we both do in the work that we do, so that other people feel like get the experience of what it's like to have a safe space. And how do you think about the boundaries? How do you reflect on yourself? And then that process of a powerful conversation allows them to realize the benefit of it in order to put those things in place in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Once they can kind of flip it and see what they did, how it worked, what situation was in, they can recognize. What I do a lot in my coaching is that people will be vulnerable and they won't even know they're being vulnerable. Be like,
right, you name it.
Do you know what you did right there? You were being very vulnerable with me. What was the difference between that and, say, doing that outside of this conversation? And they'd be like, well, I feel safer. I feel like you're not going to judge me. I'm like, okay, let's work with that. How do we recreate this for you outside of this conversation so that people can start to be vulnerable? And it always starts really small. It's like, I don't tell people how I feel. What's stopping you? It's like, well, judgment, all this kind of stuff. And by and large, it comes down to how harshly they're judging themselves.
Absolutely. The self-critical voice, right?
Yeah. And they are terrified. It's that shame thing that when they say it, other people will see what they've been hiding.
So in the spirit of vulnerability, you sound like you've cracked the code and you've figured life out and you're doing it all excellently. But we both know that we still have demons and we still have to work on this stuff. So my question to you is, currently, present day, what is one or two of the biggest challenges that you're facing internally or in your own self-development?
Fear. There's a lot of fear going on. I've been facing this whole walk, right? I've been so uncomfortable in the last 6 months. It's been like sleeping in a bed of needles every day. It's been horrible because I got a new job. It's a big position.
Yeah.
The imposter syndrome is like through the roof. It's like, who the fuck do you think you are, Henry? Like, and who the fuck do they think you are? What have you been telling them, Henry? What have you been saying? And yeah, so the imposter syndrome, the fear of like stepping into like my friend is like, you're magnificent. I'm like, do you know what? That's exactly what it is. I'm terrified of stepping into like what it might mean if I was operating at my very best without the fear, because fear is resistance to change, and that's exactly where I've been, and I've just been pushing it a bit, and it has knocked me for six. Like, I have had, in fact, over this last year, I have cried more times. I have had more severe depressive episodes than I have had in like the last sort of 5 out of 10 years sobriety. It's been horrible. But I have carried on. And there have been times when I wish that I could just die, but I did not. And in those kind of times, it's really important to know that everyone needs a break, you know? Everyone needs a break. So I just take myself off, got a little place in Norfolk, and go and hug my dog for a week.
Lovely. Lovely. And thank you for that, because I really hope that people understand the lifelong journey that is personal development, and that once you get to one sort of plateau of like, yay, I'm winning, conversations are great, and I've had this little bit of success, it's like you if you stall, right, you sort of go backwards. And so then it's going, if we want to live to our fullest potential and create the impact that we were meant to create in the world, we've got to do what you're doing, which is sometimes do it afraid. That whole Brené Brown thing of like, sometimes you've just got to do it afraid. And I tell myself that when I've got like a bigger audience or a bigger thing to do, I'm like, fear is healthy. I've just got to do it afraid, right? But what you begin to do is build up an evidence base of all the times that you didn't die, as far as fight or flight, right? You didn't die. You showed up, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but you learned from it. You impacted a life. And circling right back to what you said at the beginning, it's about service. So it isn't about all the high fives and the accolades and the perfection. It's about service. It's about giving back. I mean, what a fucking privileged place for me and you to be in, to be able to give to fucking anyone after we took and drained people, society, friendships, my own children, my siblings. Do you know what I mean? Of their resources in the most, like, I put negativity out into the world for a good number of years. And rather than being ashamed of that, I feel like my role now is to repair that through giving back in other ways. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a natural solution to having taken so much, is to then give out unconditionally.
Give out unconditionally. I love that. So finally, Henry, what advice might you give to somebody who is at the beginning stages of their journey? So perhaps they have been in addiction, but perhaps they've had some other adversity, and they've got lots of things to blame. Like you had the bullying in the boarding school and the things that you could blame, right? What might be the first step that they could take to getting them on the path of purpose, fulfillment, and courage?
Man, the pressure to come up with one single most powerful sentence.
The most powerful thing.
Come on, Henry. Dig deep, but obviously that's not going to happen.
Well, you know, it's little things, isn't it?
I'd say, like, there are going to be shit days. There are going to be shit days. Like, it's life. And consistently, when you get on this journey, it can be a real drain. But don't give up. You don't have to. You've made a choice that you're going to move forward. And that's all you have to do. And it's okay to not be okay.
That was wise. You got there, Henry.
Yes.
It's okay to not be okay. And I love that. Just show up anyway. Henry, thank you so much for your time, your vulnerability. Obviously, we're going to have you on again. We've got to talk through masculinity in a much deeper way and some of the work that you do. But for now, where can people find you if they want to get in touch?
Best place to go is henryjohnston.org, where you can find out about all the fun little things I do. I'm also really active on Facebook. Come find me at Henry Johnston. It's a black and white picture. I look like a model. I look fabulous. Ooh. I don't look like that in real life. But, hey, come find me. I love having conversations. Just wonder if you heard something on the podcast you'd like to hear more about, just, pop along. And if you're in London, let's meet up for a coffee. I'll buy you lunch.
Sounds amazing. Ooh, be aware. You might have a few people coming to you for that. Careful. I might take you up on that one. We'll add all of that into the show notes. Henry, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you, Petra.